In this video, I want to chat about death and the immediate afterlife. When we talk about the afterlife, we have to remember something very important. In the New Testament, as scholars point out, the emphasis is always upon the resurrection of the body and the renewal of the created order, both of which happen at the end of time. So when the Bible talks about everlasting life, therefore, it does not mean by that a life in heaven, contrary to popular opinion, of course. It means rather a life in the new heavens and the new earth, both of which will come together at the end of time in union with one another. In other words, when the Bible talks about everlasting life, it is talking about an everlasting embodied, resurrected life, not an everlasting ghostly and disembodied life. So when the Bible talks about everlasting life, therefore, it is referring to our lives after they have been given resurrected bodies. This, above all, is what the New Testament emphasizes. Another thing to keep in mind is this. The New Testament does not teach that this resurrection happens right when a person dies. In other words, when a person dies, they don't automatically receive a resurrected body. Their bodies are still in the grave, after all, some for centuries. The resurrection doesn't happen until the end, remember? That is, when Christ returns to the earth. And so, according to the New Testament, there are a lot of people who will die before the resurrection takes place. In fact, the resurrection obviously hasn't happened yet, and a lot of people have already been dead for thousands of years even. So where are they now? What sort of state of existence do these saints have right now? Well, let's ask that question in the following way. What happens immediately after human death, but before the resurrection? This period between a person's death and their resurrection is what Bible scholars and theologians call the intermediate state. What does the Bible teach about the intermediate state? Of course, there have been a range of views on this subject as people through the centuries have wrestled with that question, giving answers as they understand it. For example, I want to give you a few examples of how people make sense of the afterlife. Some Christians have said that when a person dies, they go to sleep. That is to say, they are unconscious and will not, as it were, become awake again until they are resurrected by Jesus at the end of time. This, of course, is the view espoused by the Seventh-day Adventists and some other Christians as well, and it's a view popularly called soul sleep. Now others, and this is a very popular opinion, one that I've alluded to already, but others have said that when a person dies, they go straight to heaven, where they will remain forever, having left their wretched bodies behind and having escaped this prison of an earth. They will forever stay in a disembodied bliss with God and with the angels and with their loved ones, never to come back to the earth, never again to receive another body. In other words, when they die, this view says that they go straight to heaven, which is their final state. They go immediately to their final state. So in other words, I guess you could say there is no intermediate state under this particular view. Now, this view is very popular among many Christians today, specifically within modern evangelicalism. Now, it might surprise most of those people who believe in this viewpoint that, as you know, this view is not biblical at all. In fact, in many ways, it has more in common with pagan Greek thought than it does with Jesus's teaching or the Bible. So, I don't think that either of these views are correct, obviously, and I've said that many times before. But I think the biblical view supports another viewpoint, and I'm going to outline that view in the next video, and hopefully I can outline exactly what the intermediate state is all about, backing it up with Scripture and so forth. But before I do that, though, it might be good to say that when it comes to the details about the so-called intermediate state, the Bible is strangely quiet about those details. And what I mean is that the Bible does not describe the intermediate state with much specificity at all, at least not enough with respect to the details that would satisfy our curiosity. And like I said before, the New Testament's emphasis is always upon the resurrection and always upon the new creation, not that intermediate state, not the time period, you might say, between the death of a saint and their resurrection. And that time period, that intermediate state, and I hate using the phrase time period for many reasons, but nonetheless, that intermediate state is just simply not touched on in the Bible as much as we would like, at least. But this doesn't mean that it isn't discussed at all. In fact, I think it's discussed enough such that we can have a high level of confidence as to what is going on in that intermediate state, between a person's death and their subsequent resurrection that's to come. So in the next video, I'm going to outline for us a few thoughts with respect to how I and a number of other scholars understand the intermediate state.